Hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Director's Cut. I'm Jackson Kinney alongside my co-director at iOS TV Sports, Drew Fry. And Drew, just doing a shorter show today to iron out the details and explain a little bit of what Major League Baseball has going on. We've talked about it for the past 2, 3, 4 episodes in passing. But I feel like we have to break it down and just kind of explain really what is happening.
Yeah,
So,
so the recent news really is the owners finally had a proposal. They thought they had locked it down. They were going to get a season going. That was going to be about 60 games, full prorated salaries for the players. And then the Players Association got back and said, hey, that wasn't what we agreed upon. We never said we had this deal in place. And so, unsurprisingly, we're back to square one. The players just submitted a new proposal, which the owners didn't really like, and so the owners, as of this recording on Thursday night, do not have an immediate response for the players. So yeah, currently where we stand, no season yet. It seems like it is just sort of coming down to some of these smaller details and the set number of games. The players wanted up to 70 games. The owners are set on 60, and once again, do still have that option to impose a 50-game season if all else fails.
which I think, obviously, at this point, the 70 game is the best way to go because I think 50 is just too short. 20 games extra isn't that much better, but I mean,
It's something.
it's the closest we're going to get to a half season.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the best. But, yeah, I mean, just the Twitter timeline of all of this. There are owners who have been quoted as saying each deal that they have received from the union is dead on arrival, and some owners say they want to play the season. Others have said they don't. I mean, I'm expecting something to get done by this time next week.
I
Whether
would like to hope so.
whether that be a 70-game season, a 60-game season, or the worst case scenario, 50-game season, I think something has to break. Something has to give.
And it seems like this past week was the closest they have ever come to actually being able to finally agree on a deal of this sort of caliber. And one thing I think is interesting was there was a big push amongst the players, and obviously the players have a much larger voice to their fans on social media. You know, they have much more access to the media and much more listening power, or hearing power, I guess.
Right.
But one of those pushes the players really made was they just said, just tell us where and when, because they were upset. They viewed the owners and the commissioner's office as being unreasonable, and they just said, fine, if we're gonna have this issue, we just need to play. Where and when? I saw multiple players just tweet out where and when.
Even Yasiel
Mike Trout
tweeted it out.
Yeah,
He's not even signed to a team.
Exactly. Still a free agent, just where and when. And I loved Mike Trout tweets out where and when, and then Bryce Harper quote tweets it with his own where and when. And like those are what I view, at least, like the two stars of baseball, at least like the faces of the game. To sort of join that united front, even like very starkly different personalities. And honestly, I think the owners, like, they responded. I obviously don't know everything that's in this deal. I'm not an agent. I'm not one of the players. I'm a lawyer, whatever. But I do feel like the owners at least responded. They gave up the most ground because there seemed to be that stalemate. And the owners finally came to the table. They said, all right, if the deal breaker has been you want the full prorated salaries, we'll give you full prorated salaries. 60 games, it's more than the 50. I think that was sort of the best case scenario. But I think now there's more of a rift because the owners came out of that saying we have a deal before it had gotten to many of the players, before the MLB Players Association president Tony Clark had been able to finalize it.
Yeah,
and what viewed as negotiations, Manfred viewed as an agreement.
Yeah, that's where it gets messy because Rob Manfred and Tony Clark met face to face, and they tried to iron out a deal. Manfred and the MLB came out saying that they thought they had a framework set out, whereas a union official has come out and disagreed against any kind of word that they had a framework. that they had any tentative agreement. So in my mind, I have fully shifted to, and I did this a while ago, fully shifted to supporting the players in this argument. And with Manfred coming out and saying they had a tentative framework, and then the union coming out and said they didn't. In my mind, I instantly think, okay, the MLB is saying they had it to put pressure on the union to accept the next deal and to fast track this and force the union into looking bad. But the union just brushed that off and said, no, we don't care at this point.
Yeah, that very much is possible, and I've been on the player side for a while now, just saying the owners are being very unreasonable. But as I was saying a little bit earlier, I think the owners finally did come to the table, and I think this deal, that whether it was agreed upon in the moment or not, I understand, every organization, every party is trying to make themselves look as best as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the players said, tell us where and when. And the owners, they did. I think they responded. They finally did it. So to me, I want the players to take this deal. I think that it seems fair. Again, I'm no expert in the subject of, legality and it's a lot of money that obviously the players have to negotiate. But from what the owners are saying, the players' new deal that they're proposing could cost them upwards of $300 million more. And to me, I see the deal that the owners just proposed as being exactly what the players asked for. I want the season. And I think now the two sides are close enough, they should be able to get it.
They should be. And there are player agents coming out and saying that they think maybe we get a season of 65 games. And that gets players closer to making 40% of what they would have got under the full prorated salary agreement. And I think that's probably where it will end up. And the season, if it goes into a 60-game season or 65, it'll start around July 15th, around July 20th, that time frame. But the league is making a lot of concessions now because the union has the leverage in my eyes, starting with the full prorated salary. And then what we've talked about and what I've talked about with a lot of people on Twitter is the league offered a big bargaining chip that the union had asked for in 2011 and 2016 CBA negotiations, which is the universal DH. And that would, under this agreement, it would go through the next two seasons until the next CBA comes up. And that's been something a lot of people have wanted to see for a long time. And I think that's going to be a huge bargaining chip in all of this.
Yeah, I know the universal DH has been something that has been pushed around a lot already. I sort of see this as a long time coming. When the leagues originally went into the American League could have a designated hitter and the National League couldn't, I knew that was not sustainable. You're not going to be able to have two separate leagues with different rules within the same sport. In Major League Baseball, it just wasn't going to work long term. And it's worked for as long as it can. Personally, I like watching the pitchers hit. I like having that 9 spot with a pitcher. I fully understand the argument against it. I fully understand people who support the DH. And at this point now, I think it would be better to have a unified league.
Yes.
To continue the split. So it's not the end of the world. I've accepted that this is going to happen for a while, but I will miss watching Clayton Kershaw, Zach Greinke, Michael Lorenzen. I mean,
that's what I was about to bring up. We both grew up as fans of National League teams.
Yes.
Well, especially for me, when growing up, anytime I heard Universal DH, I was so against it because I liked going to games, and I've been at games where Mike Leake hit home runs and Michael Lorenzen you mentioned, and just the weirdest things happening. I mean, I've seen, I think it was John Lester with the Red Sox one year in Cincinnati take a at-bat, and it was the worst thing I'd ever seen. But
right.
I think pitchers who rake peaked when Bartolo hit his home run.
That's one thing. We will no longer have those viral moments of Bartolo Colon launching that. I still don't understand that at all.
Either. I see the clip come up on my timeline a bunch, and just for no reason. And you don't need a reason to tweet it. It's amazing. But, every time I watch it, I just look and at his form and everything. It's just like, what a beautiful man. But
Oh my gosh.
the thing that I just thought of with the universal DH kicking in, with players like Hunter Green and Michael Lorenzen, and those are two Reds examples, obviously, but it's
Like
happening.
Brendan McKay.
It's happening across the league. Brendan McKay. This could give way to a new rise of two-way players, because even going into the season, the MLB had new rules regarding two-way players. And I think with the universal DH, it's going to give more pitchers who want to hit the want to get in the lineup and hit and play on their off days. I mean, Shohei Ohtani is built for this system.
Exactly. And I will say one
Yeah.
thing that helps me sleep a little better at night, knowing that the DH is, or that the pitcher's hitting is sort of out the door, is that I remember at bats last season when Michael Lorenzen was called in to pinch hit. And if a pitcher is good enough to where they'll get a chance to pinch hit, I'm fine with that. You know, I will enjoy watching someone like Lorenzen take a few hacks up there. Also, on a personal note, as much as I love watching pitchers launch balls out of the park, as a Dodgers fan, I hate watching Madison Bumgarner do it.
I was about to say, didn't Madison Bumgarner hit a home run off of Clayton Kershaw?
Off of Kershaw, yes, he did. And that was one of the most painful moments of my sporting existence. So I won't miss that. But I remember there was one season back when Kershaw and Greinke were Dodgers together. They said at the beginning of the season they were going to hold a mini wager amongst themselves to see who could have the higher batting average at the end of the season, because they were two of the better hitting pitchers, of that just throughout that little stretch. And I saw something earlier today which I wanted to share. It's a tweet from Dan Herron. They said I think he's been sitting on this for a while, but with no more pitchers in the batting lineup anymore, he said he believes this would make him the most recent or the last pitcher to go 4 for 4 in a game.
God, I'm
He
gonna
did
be.
4 for 4, and I looked it up. I don't know if he was the last one to do it. I don't know if he's the last pitcher to get 4 hits. I would assume so. I haven't fact checked that, but I went through and looked at the game. Yeah, he went 4 for 4 with 1 RBI. But my favorite stat of that game, in which the Diamondbacks, which is what the team Herron was pitching for, beat the St. Louis Cardinals 9-7. Dan Herron pitched 6 innings and gave up 7 runs. Nailed down the win and 4 hits.
I mean, hey, man, if it gets it done, it gets it done.
I love that stat line. It's a terrible stat line from a pitcher's perspective, but he got 4 hits. He got the win, which the win is what matters. 7 runs in 6 innings. And that was the last great day of pitchers hitting, I guess.
I mean, yeah. I didn't know Dan Herron did that, honestly.
Yeah.
Dan Herron, also one of just the funniest people out there. Athlete, whatever. He's hilarious.
I'll throw one more out there for you, just because I love pitchers who rake. I love that whole thing. I don't remember the year. I'll have to look that back up. But there was one season where Seattle Mariners ace King Felix Hernandez got 1 hit throughout whatever season it was, and he was at the top of his game pitching then. That 1 hit was off of Johan Santana of the Mets in interleague play, because King Felix isn't going to be, pitching, or isn't going to be hitting very often, because he's in interleague play against Johan Santana, also an elite pitcher of his time, and the Mets. And King Felix's 1 hit that entire season was a grand slam off of one of the game's best pitchers.
It's so weird, dude. It's so weird.
No sense, but I love it. Love it so much I almost knocked my computer over.
That reminded me, there was a game the Reds played in 2018 where I'm pretty sure it was the same game. If it wasn't the same game, it was in the same week. But Anthony DeSclafani hit a grand slam as a pitcher, and then Michael Lorenzen was still in the game as a pitcher, and he hit a grand slam. So either in the same game, or I think it was in the same week, actually, of 2018. But the Reds, within a span of a week, had 2 pitchers hit grand slams.
That's amazing.
I'd have to do more research because I just remembered it. But I don't know any other time that's ever happened. And I pull that out of my head at all. So I would have to do research into that. But yeah,
Yeah.
we won't have that again unless pitchers become two-way players at a high rate, which I kind of hope they do.
Yeah, and once that happens, when you get guys like McKay and Ohtani and maybe Hunter Green, maybe Lorenzen, or you could get a situation like a Rick Ankiel like 10, 15 years ago, where he was a pitcher, transitioned to an outfielder. I think there will be players that sort of are able to fill that two-way role. I don't know if it's going to be like a full-time thing like McKay and Ohtani. And I think once that happens, it will still be a very fun thing to watch. But the main argument for why the DH needs to be implemented in both leagues is that it will eliminate the guys who just step up to the plate so that they can watch 3 pitches and sit back down. It sort of does become a dead period. I remember one game, it was like the 17th inning. The Dodgers were playing 17th inning, and no, that's what it was. A blowout is what it was. So it was like 8th or 9th inning, and the game was pretty much over. The Cardinals put in their backup catcher to pitch so that they didn't burn through one of their arms. The Dodgers didn't want to bring up a pinch hitter because it just sort of felt rude at that point. The Dodgers had such a large lead, so they let their relief pitcher hit. So it was a catcher throwing to a pitcher, and that pitcher was just instructed, don't swing at anything. Just take your 3 pitches and sit back down so we can finish off this game.
Yeah.
And I understand what the point of that was, but that was also a lull.
At the same time,
it was kind of sad to see. It defeated the purpose.
Right. So yeah, both leagues looking at going to DH, and then real quick, in like a couple of minutes, we just want to go over the divisions that they are kind of proposing that they're going to have to do for less travel to save teams on risk. Regional divisions. So grouping teams into divisions based on how close they are. It's pretty simple. So like St. Louis and Chicago and Milwaukee are probably all going to be still in the same area. They're pretty close together. But then they'll probably be lumped into a division with Cleveland and the White Sox and Cincinnati. And basically, that'll happen across the country. Drew, you mentioned it earlier before we started to record. And a great example would be the AL and the NL East combining. And basically, each division combining into one mega division.
Right. And I think a lot of that's just to limit the travel, make it a lot easier. Obviously, with an expanded playoffs, it wouldn't be as big of an issue to not have as many paths into winning your division. But I think that could be very interesting to see. And right now, I know as of that first started circulating about 2-3 weeks ago, and haven't heard much about it, but I also haven't heard much against it either. And it seems like the most practical option, especially considering the NBA is already trying to put itself in a bubble when they return for the playoffs. And Dr. Fauci has recommended that a lot of leagues do take similar measures. So I think that could very well be what we end up seeing. And I think it would be very interesting to see some of these divisions combined and some of these teams have to face each other that haven't regularly faced each other anymore. I think the NL Central has the biggest advantage out of anyone else.
Oh, for sure. I think
they merged with the AL Central, which has a budding White Sox team, but not elite, a fading Indians team, no longer elite.
The Royals.
The Tigers and the Royals, and maybe the Twins are good again.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe.
And the other thing that I've thought about with this is the regional rivalries that maybe get one series a year. Like Cincinnati and Cleveland, 4 games a year. That's it. Now, probably going to be in the same division. Both LA teams, both New York teams, and both Chicago teams.
Yeah.
I mean, regional rivalries are always big because, like, crosstown rivalry, of course.
Exactly.
But imagine instead of playing one series, the Mets and the Yankees play like 3 or 4. They get bad blood, and then it's on fire. Same in Chicago, same in LA. I mean, even St. Louis and Kansas City.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to be good at the same time as another team to play up to their level. I mean, Cincinnati last year took the entire season series from the Cubs, who were battling for a playoff spot until the very end.
Yeah.
I mean,
You're talking about in-state rivalries. I was going to mention Miami and
Miami and Tampa.
But I don't know if either of them have enough fans to show up for a game.
Listen, man. as somebody in the Tampa area now, I am one of those fans. They're my secondary team, so they've at least got me when it
There
counts.
you go. You can
But
single-handedly cheer on Tampa and Tropicana Field.
yeah. But going into that with some predictions. So going off of if they do just mesh the divisions based on region,
Yeah.
who would win out of these three? Because we don't really know. There is no proposed structure on how the playoffs will work. So I'm just going to go off the idea that it's the three mega division winners and like three wild card teams.
Right. I don't have it all entirely like mapped out, but off the top of my head, when I'm looking at the East, I think the Yankees are at elite tier, and I think they're at another level. I think they'd be able to beat Tampa, beat Boston, Toronto, and Baltimore, and
But
then
then
I
you
don't
have to
think that's
go
going
against
to change.
Atlanta.
I don't think it's going to change. Atlanta's a good team, but they're not the Yankees.
That's fair.
Atlanta has a very solid core, and they've got Acuna, who's a superstar. But the Yankees have Aaron Judge, and the Yankees have Giancarlo Stanton, and the Yankees have their entire infield and an elite pitching staff that's also developing. You've got Garrett Cole to headline that staff. I don't think Atlanta or Washington is going to be able to keep up.
That's fair. And then so the Yankees out of the East, just winning that. The Central is interesting to me because I don't think things change that much.
Not really.
In the sense that the competitive teams are all going to be Cincinnati, Milwaukee, St. Louis, and Chicago.
I think the Central is going to be the tightest all the way around.
I think it'll be dominated by the NL Central, with the exception of the Twins, maybe the Indians if Lindor drags them to whatever he can, and maybe the White Sox. But I think it's going to be heavily dominated by the NL Central teams because the Reds tooled up over the offseason. Cardinals are the Cardinals. They win somehow, some way, no matter what. It's stupid. The Cubs. Yeah, I'm totally not bitter. I totally don't have years of scars from St. Louis.
Right.
And the Cardinals. The Cubs, they still have Bryant and Rizzo, so you can't really count them out. And Yu Darvish could have a really good comeback here. You never know. And then Milwaukee, Christian Yelich. I mean, there's your answer. I think those four teams dominate the Central amalgamation.
See, I'm going to disagree with you on that. I don't think they're going to dominate. I think that we could see, similar to what we had in the NL West, where there were three teams all fighting for the division right until the end. I think that's just going to expand to like 6 or 7 teams that are all fighting. Because I think each of those teams, I don't think there's an elite group like we've got the Yankees or a team that's just fundamentally sound like the Rays or the Braves. But what we have is we've got Yelich leading the Brewers, and we've got Brizzo leading the Cubs. We've got the Cardinals. We've got the Reds. We've got the Twins, who, even though they don't look as great on paper, they were a very good team last year, and they were sound.
Yeah. Here's the thing with the Central that you just made me realize. A lot of people are going to overlook it because it's the Reds and the Brewers and the Twins. There's a lot of star power on all of these teams.
There is.
Miguel Sano, Jack Flaherty in St. Louis.
Votto, if Sano was able to get back what he had 2 seasons ago, launch he's not going to launch 50 home runs in a 60-game season, but, if he gets on a hot streak, one of the players that I am the most enamored by, but I also hate the most, just it completely depends on the season, on this stretch of 20 games, is a Minnesota Twin, Byron Buxton.
Right.
Because Buxton was a top draft pick, top prospect all through his career, and every single season he's had a 30-game stretch where he's elite, and then he's had a 60-game stretch where he is barely rosterable. Sometimes it's been because of injury. But if Buxton hits his stride in the stretch of 50 games that will be the MLB season, that would be so much fun to watch. And if he's doing it at the same time Sano is mashing home runs, that Twins offense is going to be unstoppable, not to mention Eddie Rosario, who's got a ton of power as well. That team already hit some of the most home runs in the American League last season.
And if they divisionally have to play in ballparks like Wrigley and Great American for the Reds, those are pretty homer-friendly places.
Yeah. And not to mention the White Sox, of course. You said the Reds have been retooling and really bringing in a bunch of pieces, and they are. I think the White Sox are doing the same.
I
White
mean,
Sox have a lot of young talent to build up.
like
And the
Tim
Indians,
Anderson and Jose Abreu's still there.
Lucas Giolito, I think, is a future Cy Young winner.
Right. And you could say that about Cincinnati too, with Luis Castillo.
Yes,
And
exactly.
the fact that they have Nicholas Castellanos now and Mike Moustakas and still have Joey Votto. And then the rotation is Sonny Gray brought back to life, Trevor Bauer hoping to come back from his season last year.
Right.
The level that we all know he can pitch at. Luis Castillo, projected future Cy Young winner. I'm not just going to come out and say he is a future Cy Young winner. I'm not.
That is my take on it. I just really like Giolito.
And then that rotation still has guys like Wade Miley in it now and Anthony Escalfani. I mean, they're pretty solid through and through.
And my favorite pinch hitter in baseball, Michael Lorenzen. If I haven't thrown out his name enough this episode.
Who is one of the best bullpen guys of the past couple of seasons, along with Amir Garrett and all that. So, I mean, save for the Tigers and the Royals and the Pirates, you're right. The Central group is probably the best group out there.
And I do want to at least mention the Indians too, because I said they were fading elite before, and I still stand by that. But there's no reason they can't compete at the top of that division with someone like the Brewers, because the Brewers has a great offense. They've got a very solid bullpen. But are they going to be able to match up against Shane Bieber and Mike Clevenger at the top of that Indians rotation, and then hold off the bats of Jose Ramirez and Francisco Lindor, who were both, I believe, have finished top 5 MVP voting at some point in their career?
No, you're definitely right about that. The Indians aren't to be taken lightly.
Yeah.
But moving into the West now, which
the fun part for me.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting because you've got if this does happen, you'll have Mike Trout playing divisional games in Coors Field.
Oh my gosh.
Yo, wait a second.
Wow. Also in Chase Field, where there's also no air resistance.
Exactly.
Arizona.
So obviously the top team out there would be LA, the Dodgers.
I'm gonna hope.
One would think from past performances.
Right.
The Giants, probably non-factors. They've just been struggling. By the way, a team we never mentioned in the East was the Phillies, which obviously would be on the same level as the Yankees, but they'd be up there fighting against teams like the Rays and the Red Sox and such.
Yeah.
But back to the West. The Rockies, I mean, they still have Arenado.
They've had a couple of streaks. They just haven't been able to get that pitching staff clicking yet. They were the closest to taking away the division title from the Dodgers a couple seasons ago. But yeah, if this is the case, and if we get into just a West division, AL and NL disregarded, then yeah, the Dodgers are going to have to face off against the Angels, the Astros, which talk about great rivalries at this point.
Right.
Dodgers and Astros rivalry, which didn't exist before this season, and now might get started up with them in the same division.
And then another thing we might get is Joey Gallo in Coors Field.
You're just really looking forward to Coors Field, yeah.
I mean, yeah, I am, because you see all the big power hitters go there and do their thing, and then you got the prospect of guys like Joey Gallo and Mike Trout who can just hit balls as far as the day is long. Are you kidding me?
I will say, with this prospect of Coors Field, which is great, and then Chase Field is going to be similar in Arizona. Texas, it depends, but Texas tends to be a hitter's park as well. But if we want to look at the West as a whole, I think we could see some pitchers revitalize their careers, because now you get Dodgers and Angel Stadium, which aren't pitchers parks per se, but they're not bad by any means.
No,
San Diego, Oakland, San Francisco, and Seattle, which are 4 of the best pitchers parks in baseball. You could have some pitchers really find a groove in these expanded divisions.
Especially, I don't know, did you mention San Francisco's park as well?
Yes, I believe San Francisco, San Diego, Oakland, and Seattle.
AT&T Park is probably the most pitcher-friendly park, and I've seen it where guys like Billy Hamilton could go out there and just run wild. So imagine Mike Trout getting to play games out there with the speed he has.
Yeah.
or just any speedster, just
Jose
throwing one down
Altuve.
into throwing one down into Triple's alley, and then they're getting inside the park home runs. And like, obviously, this doesn't just happen because these guys have played in these parks before through interleague play, but those are only a couple series per season, a couple of games per year, a couple of
Yeah.
games per 3 years in these places. Imagine them getting a groove in these ballparks. Like you hear it all the time from guys in divisions where somebody in St. Louis really likes going to Wrigley and playing games there, or somebody in New York has a feel for the Trop for some reason down in Tampa.
Yeah.
If you can get guys to have feels for other ballparks, maybe in the future it improves interleague play for
Yeah.
at least a little bit. You never know. But the possibilities are endless. And out of the West, I mean, it would have to be a showdown between the Astros and LA.
I think it definitely would be. There
It's
can
so
be a
weird saying
solid secondary team.
LA in the West and not just referring to the Dodgers now that the Angels would share a division.
Right. Which that'd be fun because that's a freeway series. Like
Right.
those two stadiums are separated by a freeway.
They could seriously just hop on a bus. Like
Yeah.
in New York, they could seriously just hop on a subway.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, the possibilities are endless in this divisional format. And like I said, the one that's going to be the most interesting is probably going to be the Central.
I think that will definitely be the most interesting. I think there will be so much competition out there because there aren't really the same tiers. Yeah, there's a bottom tier, and I would put Pittsburgh, Kansas City, and Detroit in that bottom tier.
Mm-hmm.
But that's 3 out of 10 teams. 70% of one division realistically has a shot at taking the title. I think that would be so much fun to watch.
Right,
And
and those
over a
three
16
teams,
stretch, you're not going to get bored of it.
yeah, and those three teams could play spoiler to others. I mean, sometimes those teams who might not have great records still have the number of a division-leading team for some reason.
Yeah, exactly.
And that just comes down to matchups and play stylistically. But yeah, hopefully they get a deal soon so we can see some of the stuff we talked about.
Right.
I mean, I want to see the University Edge. I want to see these guys playing in these parks they're not used to, and then maybe getting a feel for it. These mega divisions would be so much fun.
Yeah.
And just as a one-off thing, obviously, but like, why not when the table's forcing you to, you know?
Exactly.
But yeah, I think that's about all we got.
I have one more thing I want to at least mention before we go. I saw this on Twitter from one of my favorite Twitter follows, which is Trevor Bauer. I know that you know the name.
Oh yeah.
But he said earlier, he says, I present to you the solution to all MLB problems. Lav mics. He says, mic everyone up. Players, coaches, owners, GMs, commissioners, union members, agents. Just lav everyone up. Stick a microphone on them. Transparency, accountability. He says lavs are about $200 a piece. That would cost well under $1 million to just spread those around. And that's a lot of money, yes, to like you and I. But in the grand scheme of this, they're arguing over $300 million right now.
Right.
If you can afford that $1 million, one, you alleviate the issues of the he said, she said that we're getting right now, where Rob Manfred said, we had a deal. And Tony Clark says, you gave us a proposal. That is not a deal. Two, keep those mics, start the MLB season, and how much fun is that going to be to watch? I mean, we saw the success of the XFL for football just because of the transparency they had in the replay rooms. Imagine putting mics on players while they're taking batting practice, while they're warming up. Maybe a couple of them are fine to do it in games. I know they do that a little bit in spring training. How much fun would that bring?
There's an example of this. Motorsports.
Yeah.
In NASCAR specifically, at home, the race could be in Alabama, New York, California. At home, log onto my computer, go to NASCAR.com. I can hear every driver's radio, uncensored, unfiltered, including NASCAR officials. So I can hear the rulings they're making and the reasonings behind the rulings and talking to the teams. So, I mean, it's not like it's a far-fetched idea. It's already one of the major sports leagues doing it.
Yeah, and I think we've talked a lot about how this dragging out of the negotiations has really just been MLB shooting itself in the foot. It's a sport that's trying to recover its past glory, and all it has done is just perpetually slide down the rankings. Currently, it's like the third most popular sport in the United States, and
Yep.
I wouldn't be surprised in the next couple of years it's fifth, behind the football and basketball, obviously, along with hockey and soccer. And we're seeing some other sports rise. I mean, who knows what happens over these next several years. But wouldn't that be a way to bring people back into it? And I'm not saying you have to mic up every player for every game, because I understand that's unreasonable. If you put a cord on a pitcher, that's definitely going to throw off his routine while he's throwing. But I'm just thinking of some of these examples I've heard in spring training games of, like, Anthony Rizzo got up to the plate in spring training this year before the pandemic shut down spring training. And he had a microphone on. He was talking to the announcers, and he was guessing the pitches. And he says, I haven't seen a fastball in a while. He's probably going up. I'm going to swing high for a fastball. And then he lined a high fastball into center field.
And it's not even like it's a new idea, because they do it for the All-Star game with certain players.
Exactly.
And during at-bats, and they did it in spring training too. The booth, the announcers will talk to them and ask them what's going through their mind. And like you said, they'll go through his thought process.
Yeah.
So you're 100% correct. Get the fans involved, and maybe they'll start to forgive you. But if you just show them a cold shoulder and say, all we want is your money, we know you'll watch, so we don't have to do anything different, then, like, what's the point?
Yeah, and I've seen players get into this too, because one of the Dodgers pitchers was mic'd up when one of his teammates hit a home run, and he turned and asked, he's like, can I keep the mic on for his next at bat? Can I have it back? Because this is working. Or during one of the All-Star games that you mentioned, it was one of the Astros outfielders. I don't remember Brantley, Springer, exactly who, but he was standing in, right or center field, and he was looking towards home plate, and he turns into his mic to say, as announcer, he goes, hey, he's like, I'm having a little bit of trouble. I'm gonna have to move because I can't see home plate. DJ LeMahieu is tall. I'm used to staring at 5-foot Jose Altuve. It's like, I can look over Altuve's shoulder to home plate. I can't see over DJ. And they got a few laughs out of that. And like, that's just them like goofing off in the middle of the All-Star game. Yeah. I think if you got a 60-game season, it's players just trying to jump into it, have some fun again, try and get some fans back into it. I think this is something that can work. Logistics, I don't know. I don't have the $1 million to buy lav mics for everyone and agree for them to do it. I'm guessing that Bauer meant it as like a half joke, as in like he'd be fine with it, but he doesn't really expect it.
I don't know. He's pretty serious with the stuff he tweets out with his ideas.
He is, and I'd love to see this work. I don't know how much lasting power this has, but I would love it.
Because and this is the last thing I'll say before we sign off, but he has a YouTube series called Live At Bats, where him and the batter are mic'd up. And you hear them talking the trash to each other, shooting the breeze to each other. I mean, it's super fun to watch. I mean, go check it out. And then imagine that in a real game,
Right.
I mean, but yeah, there are ways the MLB can get these fans back and get casual fans into it. And I
love to see it happen.
I think the mic'd up thing is a logical way to do it and an easy way to do it. Yeah. But thanks for tuning in, everybody. No guest this week, no movies. No guest this week, no guest today, no movies today. But we have a list of 15, so I think we're pretty set.
We finally wrote them down.
Yeah. We'll get a couple more on that list, and then we'll do the big bracket challenge, and that'll be fun to do with everybody. Probably a bunch of Twitter polls, just the perfect way to do it in 2020.
The works.
Yeah. But yeah, tune in next Wednesday. We'll see you then. Drew, you got anything else to say?
No, I'm glad to be here. Glad that we can at least get baseball close to coming back. Hopefully we'll get there. Little progress.
We're right on the edge, I feel. But
yeah.
Until then, thank you for watching. We will see you soon.